As it's just after the hour, we'll get going with the launch of our white paper. So welcome to the launch of Site Foundation's white paper, which arises from the results of our qualitative research with 50 US corporations on the future face of incentive travel. I'm Pádraig Gilligan. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Site and Site Foundation, and today I'm joined by Hamish Reid, Associate Director at MMGY Hills Balford and a Trustee at Site Foundation. Welcome, Hamish. By Selena Sinclair, CEO at Realm and VP of Content and Research at Site Foundation. And by Terry Mannion, CEO at Inspire Consulting and President of Site Foundation. So Terry, can I go straight over to you and ask you to introduce our white paper?
Terry, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, Terry, rookie mistake there. We're going to have to ask you to go back to the beginning again because you're on mute.
That's pretty embarrassing, and it's only my 9,000th Zoom this year. So thanks a lot, Pádraig, and thanks to everyone that's joined us today. As we all know, we've been seeking answers and living in a time of uncertainty for at least 17 months. It feels like a decade for all of us, I'm sure. But now as the light starts to become visible at the end of this tunnel, the Site Foundation wanted to seek answers specific to incentive travel and felt the timing was right. We also wanted to have a qualitative survey with a consistent group of contributors so that we could track changes in opinion from that same audience as we move forward throughout 2021 and perhaps beyond. So let me provide some background to that approach. As I mentioned, as a qualitative survey series, we will hold 3 of them in 2021. The responses are provided exclusively by professionals in corporations that are directly involved in the execution or delivery of incentive travel programs. We're not going to meetings and conventions and events in general. We're sticking to our commitment to the incentive travel world, and thus everyone that was being asked to participate was an active executive in some form of incentive travel. We also were very specific that we compiled a database of US-based professionals for this first series. And the responses and those that accepted came from 17 different verticals. So we're very happy with the number of corporations and industries covered in this. There's a heavy response from some of our traditional automotive and finance and insurance, et cetera, but there's a nice smattering of responses from all across a number of verticals. These people were personally approached by Site Foundation, each of our trustees providing lists of clients of theirs or contacts of theirs, and thus several agreed to participate in the survey. We pose 8 to 10 questions for each survey, yet we're sure to keep a core set of questions remaining the same for each edition, so we provide vital insights around emerging trends and can track those opinions. I'm going to read here for a little bit, but questions for the corporate perspective that we were looking for were types of incentive travel and their likely increase or decrease in frequency over the next 3 years, impact of the pandemic on incentive, reward, and recognition programs, timeframes for resumption of domestic or international in-person meeting, event, and incentive travel experiences. We did dabble into the meeting and event side there just to see what the general plan for bringing people back together was. We asked about changes being made to the design of incentive travel programs in light of the pandemic. And a very important piece was the attitude of the corporate C-suite toward the resumption of incentive travel programs. We also asked for considerations and criteria for selecting a destination in the post-pandemic world, and their biggest and most important learning as a result of the disruptions caused by COVID-19. As always, we can't undertake these projects without great support, and this series is supported by Accor and the Abu Dhabi Convention and Exhibition Bureau. We thank them very much. The survey was fielded over a 2-week period in early to mid-April, and we had 50 complete responses, along with considerable additional verbatim content that is still being analyzed and sorted as we go through that detail. Our VP of Content and Research at inSITE Foundation is Selena Sinclair, and she's also the CEO and founder of Realm, a global DMC organization. Selena provided a first glimpse of the content and the results of the Corporate inSITEs initiative during Site Night all night. Many of you will remember that 15-hour telethon that kept most of us up all night back in May, or all throughout the day and early morning, depending on where you were tuning in from. So you might have got a glimpse of it then. But now that we've had time to dive deep into the data, we're delighted to release our white paper on the future of incentive travel, as seen by 50 US-based corporate end users of incentive travel. We're now going to go to a video of Selena, and I have to tell you that we have been experiencing some buffering issues today. We apologize for that, but the voice does come through well, and the video will be posted later on Site Global. We've chosen to blame it on the distance between Australia and Dublin. I'm not sure how many of you who are tech savvy will buy that, but that's what we're going to go with today. So we apologize for the little bit of buffering that might happen. We'll cross our fingers and hope that it doesn't happen in the live event, which we're in now, but let's pull up the video.
So thank you, Terry. So firstly, I'm delighted, of course, to be here with you today to launch our white paper, the first in a 3-part series that will make up the inSITE Foundation's new Corporate inSITEs series. So overall, we really have a positive news story to share, which matches really the recovery and resumption that we already start to see around the world. Of course, as vaccination programs start to take hold, and business activities are already resuming around the world again. So we've categorized our white paper into 3 key categories, or under 3 key headings, and each one of those headings will constitute a chapter of the white paper. So our first heading talks to the really overwhelmingly positive sentiment that the report shares about the incentive travel industry overall. And that is that travel rewards, or belief in travel rewards, remains extremely strong in corporate America. And we reached out to organizations, of course, understanding everything that's gone on in the past year and 18 months, and the uncertainty that we've all faced and continue to face. Do they believe that incentive travel and reward programs will remain part of their strategy to motivate and reward their employees in the future? And we're pleased to have seen, of course, that 94% of companies did say that their senior management is 100% supportive of resuming incentive travel and maintaining incentive travel as part of their strategy to reward and continue to drive their sales performance in the future. So our second heading really speaks to the pure DNA of incentive travel, and really unleashes something purely human, which is our need for interpersonal communications and connections. And that is that the power of human connections is now really driving a resounding hunger to meet. I think we all know that. We are all cannot wait to be together again. And 71% of our respondents, of course, pivoted to another type of travel incentive or reward program during 2020. But 82% of our cohort did tell us that they were already planning or beginning to plan an incentive travel program for 2022 and beyond. And only 2% of respondents told us that they're steering away from any type of incentive travel activity at the moment. So that's, of course, a really positive sign for the recovery that we could expect globally within the next 2 years. And finally, our white paper calls out what will be the underlying changes to incentive travel. as companies evaluate the lessons that they've learnt during the last 12 to 18 months. It comes as no surprise that safety and security is now the #1 concern for companies as they start to plan and look to travel around the world again. And risk management and better analytics have now been signaled as really the 2 key priorities for companies to improve in their incentive travel planning and processes in the future. So in the white paper, we also reach out to industry experts from the DMC, DMO, hotel and industry sector to really get their viewpoints and perspective on the results. So I'll leave it at that. We do hope you enjoy the full white paper. Please go to the Site Global website where the full 20-page research piece is available for you to download. And with that, back to you, Terry.
Thanks, Selena. I don't know if many were envious of the palm trees in the background and the seagulls. I certainly don't have that here in Toronto as I'm overlooking a very cloudy cityscape. But thanks, Selena. Really appreciate all the work that the Research and Content Committee put into this. We're very proud of what we've created, and we know the rest of the series will be just as good. This is a perfect expression of Site Foundation's commitment to the industry at large and focusing as the only association and foundation that focuses only on incentive travel. We hope this brings a great perspective for you. As Selena said, there'll be 2 further editions, Corporate Insights in 2021, providing a comprehensive tracking of the future face of incentive travel as we move forward out of this horrible era that has been COVID-19. Pork, I believe we've some questions coming in.
Yeah, Terry, there are questions, and just before we jump into that, just a few shout outs. Lots of people from around our global community joining us this afternoon. Miguel from Portugal, Violet from China, Julie from South Africa, Heather from Florence, Natalia from Costa Rica, Lisa from a very hot Minnesota, and Beryl from Greece. Just a couple of the almost 200 people that we have on the call. So it's been a great turnout. We're going to be joined by Hamish, another Site Foundation trustee and an associate director at MMGY Hills Balford, for this few questions that we have at the end of our presentation. And one of our journalist friends asked this one in advance, and I thought it was a good way to kick off. So Terry, could you highlight what surprised you in the survey results?
Well, I was asked this question a week ago, another iteration of this, just a chat I was having about Corporate Insights. And at that point I said, nothing really surprised me. You'll see in the report, it's a pretty optimistic viewpoint, and I tend to be a pretty optimistic guy, so I wasn't overly shocked. But when I thought about it a little bit more, what probably surprised me was the speed of the recovery in the US. That I maybe shouldn't be surprised by that, because the US seems to bounce back from whatever challenge they face quite quickly and dust themselves off and move on. So that's a credit to them as a nation and people. But I didn't expect it to move that quickly, and it is a little bit more optimistic, which is great, than the incentive travel index that we did last fall with our partners at FICP and IRF and other surveys that we've all seen. So it is trending faster, and that's fantastic news. But here in Canada, we're not seeing recovery at the same pace or levels as the US. Matter of fact, I'm waiting for somebody to open up a shop so I can get my hair cut. We're still kind of in that mode, but that looks like it's right around the corner. Hamish, Europe and the UK still appear a little ways off too, with some moving targets. Can you let us know what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, they are moving targets, and I suppose the answer is sort of yes and no to the bounce back. I think I'm always wary to make sort of comparisons between countries, because if we had looked where certain cities were 6 months ago and where they are now, we can end up in a very, very sort of murky crystal ball. But I think, you know, what we've had here in Europe is obviously the UK was far ahead of the game when it came to the vaccination. And, you know, very, very large percentage of the population has already had 2 vaccines. I'm not quite old enough yet to have had 2 vaccines, I'd just like to point out, but nearly there. And, you know, so other parts of Europe, not so much, but then other parts of Europe haven't had to deal with certain of the variants. So, yeah, it's a sort of coming and going. UK is due to reopen June 21 fully, although, you know, if you read one paper, it will say it's a bit delayed. But yeah, there is a little bit of delay, but it's definitely on the way back. I think from a US-Europe point of view, something that might, you know, people sometimes overlook is that Europe and the US have been essentially sharing the same vaccine families, whether it's AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and others are available. But that means that travel between those, Europe and the US,
So folks, it appears that we may have lost Hamish. Terry, are you still online?
I am.
You are, okay. So we'll continue on. I wasn't sure, was I the one who was lost or was Hamish the one that was lost? But obviously I can see now in the chat box that it is in fact Hamish. So hopefully he will rejoin us shortly. But just to go to a second question, Terry, just in relation to contracts. That third sort of takeaway on the survey was all around what are the changes, and the top change called out by our 50 corporate executives was very much in the area of contracts. And I'm just wondering, where is that going to lead to as regards the future for incentive travel? Will we be in that kind of once bitten, twice shy scenario where corporations will be very slow to sign any contracts at all, or will it work itself out?
Well, I think everything tends to work itself out in some way, but yes, very shortly after, you know, everybody sort of bounced back off that initial shock and back in, depending on where you were, March or April of 2020. And immediately clients were beginning to scrutinize the current contracts they had, look at future contracts they had, primarily around force majeure. I mean, everyone was caught by surprise by the pandemic and the length of it, the severity to our industry. And there was a lot of gray in even well-written force majeure clauses, you know, may not have even had the word pandemic anywhere close to it. And it was just left, there was a lot left for interpretation. So no lawyer on the planet likes interpretation. So, you know, that created a bit of risk and uncertainty for all parties. And it certainly has created a real focus on those clauses. But you know what, we're working through them with you know, the clients that I used to work with at Creative Group and you know, those that our site friends work with now. I think people are figuring it out, but that will be a high point on the radar for quite some time.
And I think when you look at the white paper itself, one of the interesting things is to systematically go through the verbatim comments around that whole area that come directly from our corporate colleagues who actually took the survey and submitted the responses. And it goes two ways. You can see those who feel they were burned as a result of perhaps maybe being taken advantage of in the whole kind of unfolding of events, and then others who were quite the opposite, who were focusing on, wow, we are in an industry that's all about relationships, and I never could have imagined that I would find such flexibility, particularly with the DMC community. They're called out actually quite strongly in the report and in those verbatims, but also on the hotel side. Did you notice that too, Terry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I with a few exceptions, we would side on the relationship, the openness to dialogue, understanding that there was not a segment in our industry, the hospitality industry in general, but incentive travel for sure, that wasn't damaged by this. And everyone, especially early on, understood that. Now, as you start to try to perhaps manipulate a force majeure clause and delay your cancellation unfairly to hotels and the others involved, you're going to get some pushback, and because we're all fighting for survival at that point was many of our fears. So that changed a little bit, but initially it was very, very collaborative. Let's get through this. And we really did not see a whole lot of the bully mentality that did come through with some people. But I agree, Pork, those comments were primarily very positive in how we work together as an industry. And that I don't think should come as a shock to those that have been in this industry for a long time, because we do tend to act that way. And in the worst situations, we tend to be very normal people about it and get through it.
Very much so, very much so. We did promise a 15-minute presentation, and we'll try to keep to that, although I think we are a little bit over. But there is a great question from Anoop, which I'm going to hit you with now, right between the eyes, Terry. So, what is the prognosis for long haul, particularly Asia travel, for incentives from the US, UK, and Europe? So you take North America and I'll take Europe.
Okay, so you're talking about North America traveling internationally.
Yeah.
Well, just to jump right to the end of it, and in the interest of time, we're really looking at 2024 being, back to pre-pandemic levels of travel, both domestic and international. Domestic, obviously, coming back quicker than that. You saw that 82% of our responders are planning 2022 programs, and that isn't just domestic, that's domestic and international. 2023, it begins to grow again, and 2024, we're getting back to normal. Normal being a word that could be defined in many different ways. I mean, we're going to have protocols and situations that are new, but the levels of interest in travel appear to be coming back in 2024, back to where they were pre-pandemic. I hope that helps, Anoop.
And just from the European perspective, Anoop, I think the situation is exactly the same. There are travel restrictions, and there is a little bit of, a vaccination nationalism going on as well, where vaccination programs are not necessarily accepted between different regions of the world. Hamish covered it earlier on, how the US and Europe is operating out of the same vaccine pool. So there's a greater chance of those two regions getting back into contact with each other. But there are issues in relation, say, to China, which appears not to be admitting people who are not vaccinated with a Chinese vaccine. So I think it's all to play for. Hamish, I see you're back. Do you have anything final to add?
I don't know where you lost me. It was obviously I used the word Pfizer, and the world of the internet cut me off straight away. I would just add to that. I'm not sure from Europe there is the sort of a nationalism regarding which brand was used or not. I think it's more of a question of making sure that the risk is there. There'll be plenty of groups going to Middle East, and we know of plenty of groups going to Asia in 2022 and beyond. Perhaps there's a different cultural tie. Obviously, you've got very strong links between places like France and Thailand, and the UK and Taiwan. So there will be those individual market things to look at. It's very easy to sort of blanket Europe as one, but there are a lot of different markets within it.
I'm going to hit you with the last question now that you're back, Hamish. Anything in particular that jumped out as being unusual in the survey from your own perspective, working with destinations?
I'm still fascinated, and I have mentioned this on other calls before, in the idea of the hybrid incentive, because I do not want to be sitting in the office watching the rain come down, watching my PC or watching my laptop and seeing my colleagues in Los Cabos or somewhere else glamorous and warm. So I'm still a little bit lost as to the hybrid. And I think there's still a little bit of education for all of us in a way to really work out what do people mean by a hybrid incentive. Is it really a meeting with a bulk of an incentive, a part of it being an incentive where they're broadcasting? Is it a product launch part of an incentive? So I still think that's a little bit of a question. I was a bit surprised at that number, and I was delightedly surprised. And by the way, everybody, this was not a fixed, we didn't ask 50 people whether or not they're going to carry on because we knew they would. So it was a very open, transparent. We targeted companies rather than people we necessarily knew. So it is realistic. It's not just positive. It is realistic. And I was surprised at the numbers, delightedly surprised at the numbers who actually still believed in the value of incentive travel. And partly, I think that's because this pandemic has gone on for so long. I think a lot of corporations have really started to recognize the true value of getting people on incentives and in other trade shows and other conferences. It's almost like it's a hard, and it's been a very difficult part for our industry, but it's almost a fillip to change some of that perception.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hamish. Terry, I'm going to let you just sum up everything as in your capacity as this year's Site Foundation president. There are 2 more editions of the white paper to come.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be looking at doing something late summer, early fall, and then right at the tail end of the year, the results of which may not be out until 2022. It just depends on, you want to make sure that timing is right and we're topical with it. So we're very pleased with the work that our committee's done. We're thankful for the 200 and some that have joined today, and please spread the word. It's available on Site Global, and thanks to everybody for supporting us and supporting Site.
We'll apologise collectively now for going slightly over the time. Well, not just slightly. We've doubled the time, but the numbers have stayed solid. So thank you so much for your attention. Go onto the website siteglobal.com. It's all there for you to download. Plus, you can see the actual raw results of the actual submissions that came in. So it's all there, and I think a really, really good news story as we build for the future and hopefully build back better. So thanks again for your attendance, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.